I think we'll get started actually. So now, thank you so much for stepping forward to share this presentation with us today, and thank you for everybody for joining us in this session. So this is session 1D, and we have Niall Ashley with us. He's relatively new to the mainframe in terms of, from my perspective, but he's hugely successful in everything he's achieved in terms of his work, at the technical side of things, in terms of mentoring other people, coaching other people, in terms of stepping forward to represent the youth at the GSC, and in terms of putting himself forward to volunteer for activities such as helping out with universities and colleges to support and really inspire a young generation to come and join the mainframe platform. So please do enter any questions you might have in the chat today, and I will read them out to Niall as and when it's appropriate to do so. And we'll open up the conversation towards the end as well for everybody to unmute. I will also put the all-important feedback link in the chat as well. So please do provide feedback so we can make sure we are constantly improving our presentations. So I'll leave it as that for now. And Niall, I hand over to you. Maybe you want to add a bit more to your introduction, and then please proceed with your content.
Yeah, thank you very much, Atul. There's not actually that much more for me to add for the introduction. I guess it's just worth saying I left a career in the aerospace industry in around June, July 2021. Then I was working part-time as a barista at a cafe, and then was applying for other jobs in the meantime. That was my kind of interim job, and then I got this full-time job at BMC, which I ended up leaving just about a year and a half later, and left for Vitali. But that was the start of a whole new career. So this session on sort of the applying for jobs is still very fresh in my mind. It's still very relevant, and I think it's worth looking at from the perspective of both as an employee or potential employee, aspiring to get a job, but also from the perspective of employers. What can you do to kind of keep talent, retain talent, rather than having attrition, but also maybe making your jobs more attractive. So it's a multifaceted session really to look at, what can we know, learn, and I guess keep in mind when we apply for jobs, and also when as certain companies are advertising jobs. So we'll touch on a quick story just to kind of start things off. So this is my boss, Mark Wilson. So Mark is a technical director at Vitali. He's a cybersecurity expert. And he's an ambassador, well, actually an IBM champion, ambassador for IBM and a champion as well. He is both the presenter for GSC as well as the region manager for the United Kingdom. In this picture, he's presenting, I don't know to who or about what, but as you can see on the picture, he loves vehicles, including motorbikes. Now, Mark is doing very well for himself as such. By doing very well, I actually mean he owns over 20 motorbikes, quite a few cars, and he stores them in a separate garage from, well, I can assume it's separate from his mansion. It's definitely separate from his house, but I don't know how big that house is. Now, Mark loves to tell this story about when he got his first real job in the 1980s. He was 16 years old, and he basically walked into a computer systems business, like a shop, and said, I'd like to have a job. I'd like to do this work. I think as a mainframe operator. No, I tell you this story because life is unfortunately not like that anymore. You can't at 16 years old just walk into, I don't know, Waitrose or Dell or PC World or something and say, I'd like to have a job here. Realistically, at 16 years old, they probably wouldn't employ you. You're maybe seen as a risk. And also because there's formal application processes you have to follow in line. So things have changed, and I think it's worth recognizing that straight off the bat. So let's just put it clearly, applying for jobs is not all smooth sailing. There are going to be kind of choppy waters ahead. So please, just as we get started, please do not be under the illusion that this transition, for me, for example, from one career to another or one job to another is easy. It might not be straightforward. However, it ultimately will be worth it in the end. So how could this look for you as an applicant? Okay, so let's look at a case study that I call the 73-3. So I shared this with someone recently from University of Wolverhampton, and it was from a Reddit page called Data is Beautiful, and they basically represented this 73-3, as I'll show in a minute. But over the 18 months that they were applying for jobs. They were employed at the time, but they weren't happy with their jobs. They were kind of intermittently applying for other jobs. Dissatisfied with this, as I say, this kind of current job, they casually looked for opportunities, and so every month or two, they'd send off a new application to 1 or 2, maybe even 3 places. Maybe they'd take an interview or 2, get rejected, and that might discourage them. And then a few weeks or months later, they might come back. So since the visualization is probably a bit small to read, basically we start off with there's 73 applications. They've had a recruitment agency kind of approach them for a few, and the rest they've applied for directly. Now, out of that 73, 35 companies never applied, never replied to them whatsoever to say yes or no. 21 rejected the applications, 16 offered an interview, and then from the 16 interviews that were offered, we can go through and we can see that there was 6 that offered a second interview, 9 that actually rejected the applications sort of straight off the bat, and ultimately 3 offers were made out of 73, with the individual pulling out of a few as well, withdrawing their application from a few. And so that shows kind of in the green the success, and in the in the kind of oranges you've just got the kind of rejections, and then the no reply kind of at the center top, the top middle. And so that's how it can happen. You can go from 73 to 3, which is statistically not great odds. That is how it can be, unfortunately. So as I say, over 18 months and 73 applications, they got 3 offers. I mean, that's roughly 1 in 24, 1 offer for every 24 applications. So that's really doom and gloom. I didn't want to set your expectations in the wrong place. So I think it's worth acknowledging that this sort of thing is possible, is realistic. However, let's have a look at some stats that are kind of less doom and gloom and more informative. Okay, so 24 weeks. It takes the average person 24 weeks to go through the hiring and interview process and then to get acceptance or refusal. Most of these stats for reference are taken from sort of American studies, so it is going to be slightly different if you're in, say, a different continent like Asia or Europe. But 24 weeks can be through from the first application kind of that they send off through to the 3rd interview, depending on how many there are. Maybe they even have to do kind of an entrance exam depending on what the kind of job role is, and then actually getting a physical kind of offer in writing to accept or decline. It can take 24 weeks, so just under half a year. I mean, I will say actually that there's certain companies or certain places, that take longer. I think in the UK, if you were to apply for GCHQ, or maybe in America, you apply for, I don't know, the NSA. I'm sure their applications are so, they're very, very strict. They don't allow certain things that could probably take the best part of a year, maybe even longer. So yeah, certain applications can take a very, very long time. On average, a candidate will get 1 interview request, 1 invitation for an interview for every 6 applications they complete. And also the average corporate job opening, so this is generally like a big business, so maybe like your sort of Dell or your IBM versus maybe something like Vitali, which is obviously a lot smaller. The average corporate job opening gets 250 resumes, and of those, roughly 1/50th, or 5 out of 250, will be asked to attend an interview. So they sift through a lot of people before they kind of send the application, the interview, invitations out. So 23 days is the for all candidates. This is the interview process. It's how long it takes. So from the first interviewee to the last, it can take, as a rough average of 23 days. So that might be 23 people, 1 a day for 23 days, 23 working, business days, or it could be many, many people a day, but only 1 day or 2 days out of a week. So maybe they only do the interviews on Monday, Tuesdays, but 23 days is the average time for all candidates to be interviewed. And that's usually, I think, first interviews, possibly going into second if they're doing that quickly. And so again, let's like talk about that 250 resumes. So again, that will be 4 to 6 people into the interviews, roughly 5, and only 1 will get an offer. So that's just a diagram, obviously shown there. It's the source of that's from Glassdoor, but it shows just how small the number of opportunities are for every opportunity, for the actual job opportunities there really are for every kind of, I don't know, job opening that's posted online. Just because there is a job opening and it says we need a team of we want a massive expansion to our team, actually they're going to get a lot of resumes in and they're only going to take a few people. And again, that's 1 interview for every 6 applications. So this is all quite hard information to hear, and it needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, granted. But most important thing is, let's use that. Let's take those stats that we just talked about, and let's say, okay, what can we advise you on to maximize your chances? So let's say you're applying for a job and you're saying, I really want to work for BMC. I really want to work for Rocket Software, Phoenix Software, etc. What can I do to really, really maximize my chance? And what's also worth acknowledging, maybe it's not advice that I can follow, but something I should just keep in mind in the back of my mind. So that's this kind of chapter of the presentation. So we've all been in the dating scene. We've all done the, it's not you, it's me. Not me. I get rejected a lot, but that's one that is common anyway. It's not you, it's them. So in this case, do not take a job rejection personally. It actually might not be you. When they say, oh, it's not you, it's me, genuine, it might be. It might just be them. Okay. Companies are, especially nowadays where there's a lot more bureaucracy involved, companies will actually close positions without telling people who've applied. As we saw earlier, a lot of people, they just never send a kind of a clarification, just to let you know we're sort of we're not taking anyone, or we're closing this early. No more applications from an earlier deadline instead of the kind of original deadline. So companies will often close a position without telling those who applied. There may be many reasons for that. Okay. Let's say you're a big company, you're given an allocation of budget. You're told, you're going to have £50,000 for this team, and it costs £25,000 salary for each person, so you can get 2 people. But then actually, your printer's broken, and you need to order the hardware as well. You need to get new laptops and all that. So you can either pay both people less money, so instead of 25,000, maybe it's 20,000, or you just say, actually, we'll just take 1. So all of a sudden, that opening, which was available for more people, for 2 or 3, is now just 1. So they might have reduced the budget, and then that's cause and effect. Maybe they have such a low budget they can't afford anyone, and they just don't hire. Another reason is they might have just hired or promoted someone internally. So let's say Atul's applying for this position in BMC, and I'm applying for the same position. It's more cost efficient for BMC to promote Atul because they don't have to do all this paperwork. They know him; he's a known variable, versus me as an external, not as known. There's all this paperwork to sign me up. They've got to enroll me in like HR and pension systems and all this. So it's actually cheaper and more efficient to just promote someone internally. So in that case, as I say, it's not you. Your application could be amazing. You could even legitimately be better for the job than someone else. Like I could be, not that I am, better for the job than Atul, but they might hire him because it's more convenient. And as I say, you could be the most qualified person and not get the job. It's awful, but that is just sometimes how the hiring process works, especially, as I say, with more and more bureaucracy involved. What's most important is this: do not take it personally. You not being given a immediate job offer or an interview offer, invitation for an interview, is not a reflection on your quality. It's something that is just unfortunately beyond your control. So next up, patience is a virtue. Okay, it's a waiting game, right? Like I say, it takes the average person 24 weeks to go through the hiring and interview process. The interview process alone can take 23 days. So let's say you're the first interviewee. It could take 23 days before you hear back, because they'll have, more, actually, if they have to then do the interviews and read through the feedback. So very few things in life will give you instant gratification. You will apply for a job and you will have to wait. Rome wasn't built in a day. Your career won't be built in 24 hours either. Just take your time. learn as much as you can, read as much as you can in the meantime, and maybe every interview that you do have, ask for feedback. Could you please send me some feedback to my personal email address? I'd be very curious to know like what I could do better, or what I could have done differently. So use that time wisely. Don't just sit there for 23 days hoping on this one job. Maybe look elsewhere in the meantime, and just as a backup, apply elsewhere. Learning new skills and that kind of personal evolution. So people will take approximately 20 hours of deliberate, this is specifically if you are really focused, deliberate and focused practice. After those 24 hours, you can actually become reasonably competent in a new skill. That's all it takes, 20 hours, less than a full day. So while 20 hours may not make you an expert, I could juggle maybe 2 balls after 20 hours, 3 balls after 20 hours of practice. I might not be able to juggle 18 balls, and I might not be able to do tricks with it. I might not be an expert at juggling, but it's enough to become proficient and confident in the basics of a new skill. So if, for example, you are looking at a job, and let's say I'm looking at a job at BMC, and there's a software role and there's a DevOps role, and I know a lot about software, but I know nothing about DevOps. In theory, I could actually apply for that job and then spend 20 hours over the next couple of days or more time over the next couple of days learning, to the best of my ability about DevOps. And within 24 hours worth of kind of training and learning, I could actually know quite a rudimentary but amount, but enough to get me by. Okay, so be willing to learn and be willing to evolve as a person. It doesn't take that long to really, as I say, push yourself and grow and thrive. So this one's a bit of a weird one, but you're more like a multi-tool than you would actually think you are. So according to REC recruitment training, the average person has actually close to 500 transferable skills. So they're going to be, both generic and sort of more niche. So your generic ones might be, I'm a team player, I'm punctual, I'm a good communicator. Okay, those are the ones you'd put on your CV. Everyone puts them on their CV. You're never going to say I'm not a team player or I'm not punctual. But what about the ones you're overlooking? Okay, so in theory, I apply for a role as a senior manager or a team leader. Okay. Now, in the case of management, being compassionate and motivational and being punctual, with sort of, I don't know, different projects, being good at time management, those are all good. You have to manage people, you have to manage their time, you have to manage their responsibilities, you have to motivate those people. So compassion and being motivational are things that don't sound like your average. Compassion isn't something you'd necessarily put in a CV because, well, what's the relevance? But actually it might have more relevance than you think. Equally, showing loyalty and empathy, they're really good traits for team working. You need to support people, so you need to be loyal to those on your team. You need to be have a lot of camaraderie and empathy. If something goes wrong, if something you don't want someone to take all the weight on their shoulders, you want to support them and have them support you back. So those are traits that are really important for team working. And this list kind of goes on. There's no harm in applying for multiple different job roles because you don't actually know what you might excel at. And having something as inherent as empathy actually is an asset if you apply to the right role and if you pitch it in the right way. You're only as good as your last mistake. This one, again, maybe sounds a little bit kind of harsh, but it's actually the opposite. It's more optimistic. So when you make a blunder, because inevitably we all do it, it's not an if, it's a when. When you make a blunder, try not to let it get you down. Instead, push yourself, recognize what you did wrong, and try to learn all that you can from that experience. So, many mistakes will teach you a lesson and how to improve in the future. Say, for example, whether that's just something like I left something too late and then I was panicking on the day, so I need to be better with my time management and my planning in advance. You made a mistake, you've learned from it, and you remediate that. You say, for the future, I will not do this. I will do this instead. And actually, this is great because when you have an interview, many interviewing staff, the actual kind of staff there who ask you questions, they will hear people constantly talk about, when I was at my best, I did this. I am at my best now and I do that. It's everyone kind of being, self-congratulatory. I'm so great. Here's a pat on the back for myself. But what's more interesting is, what about when you weren't at your best? You're not selling yourself. You're being humble. You're being honest. When you weren't at your best and you made a mistake, what did you do? And in your interview, having the humility to admit to a time you made a mistake, to admit to a time where your day didn't go as planned, but how you were persistent and resourceful in spite of that, that will be valuable. That will take you far, because you will stand out. You aren't the one person, you aren't one of many people who's gloating about their successes. You're one of the few people who's willing to say, I'm flawed, I've made mistakes, but I've actually become a better person as a result of them. I've grown and thrived. So, like I say, you're only as good as your last mistake. It's not about you on your best day. It's about you on your worst day. So just remember that, as I say, every mistake, every failure has an opportunity to learn, and actually it can do well to set yourself apart in an interview by using that. Now, LinkedIn, everyone in this call's probably used LinkedIn. Everyone who watches this video and record has probably used LinkedIn. In fact, 87% of recruiters use LinkedIn to check for candidates. And that's sourced by JobVite Recruiter Nation Report 2016. So it's a bit out of date, but I can imagine, if anything, it's only gone up since then. LinkedIn is fast becoming the default tool for recruiters, simply because the sheer information that's available to them. So LinkedIn allows you to, upload files and format information, so you can almost make an online CV, an online portfolio, and still engage with communities. And that is a normal CV wouldn't allow. So use that to your advantage. If you know that multiple companies you're applying to will inevitably look at you on LinkedIn, don't be the one person who doesn't use it or has a really old, kind of clunky looking profile. They have their photo from 5 years ago. They have a really kind of unprofessional picture. Like, it can do well to set yourself apart, but maybe just think about finding the right balance. But LinkedIn is a tool to use. It's an asset if you use it in the right way. And like I say, 87% of recruiters use it. That's, that means that the majority of jobs you apply for, especially in this industry, will check you out on that. They will kind of, Facebook stalk you, basically. They'll stalk you on LinkedIn, and they will find out what they can. So, as I say, recruitment, if you want to, especially if you apply to a recruitment agency, if they're approaching you with a job, you definitely want that good, because the first thing they're going to check is your LinkedIn. And when I was at BMC, we got a kind of free subscription to LinkedIn Premium, LinkedIn Gold, whatever it's called. And I used to get emails all the time of, this recruitment person has looked at your profile, this recruitment person. And it's what they do. Recruitment staff, one of the first checks they do is, it's all well and good seeing a CV out there in the wild. What do they look like on a more consistent basis, using this sort of professional social media platform. Right, sorry, that one's next. So take work experience wherever possible. Okay, don't think, just do. So let's say you're a student, because we have a lot of students with GSE, and you want to apply into IT. If you've done a 3-year degree and you haven't done a year in industry versus someone who has, realistically, employers are going to take the person with a year in industry. Even if you haven't done a full year in industry, you could have done maybe 2 or 3 weeks of work experience as a summer placement or a winter placement. And that's really important, because 91% of employers actually prefer their candidates to have work experience, and 65 of those prefer it to be relevant work experience. So instead of just saying, well, I've got work experience in general IT, it's, if you want to apply to the mainframe world, have a work experience in the mainframe world. And that was a study taken by the NACE Job Outlook in 2017. Again, slightly outdated, but if anything, those numbers would have only gone up. Nowadays, or at least as far as the Gen Z report by Accenture in 2017, 78% of 2017 graduates have completed an internship or apprenticeship, because that's on the job experience. And this experience is more important than a theoretical kind of, degree that's just theory. It's the application of that knowledge into a job, and the knowledge of working systems, working professionalism, camaraderie, teamwork, like how hierarchies work in businesses. That's all very, very useful, and that's on the job experience that you don't necessarily get when you do a theoretical degree. So that's something to keep in mind. What's the harm in emailing, you kind of companies like, as I say, Rocket, Dell, Phoenix, I don't know, 21 CS. You can apply and just say, look, I'd be really interested in doing work experience. Maybe they say no, maybe they say yes, but having work experience will give you an advantage. So employee benefits is something to take into consideration. Your salary is important, and at the end of the day, that will be how you pay the bills. You cannot, you don't pay rent with kind of meal breaks. You don't pay rent with paid vacation or social security or I don't know, anything like that. You pay the bills with your salary, granted. However, some companies may not be able to offer as much money directly, but might be able to offer other benefits. For example, let's say look at pay rise as an aspect on there. If you start a job and you're starting at a lower salary, but you know the percentage increases each year, so you start at, let's say, 40 grand, but you know that you're going to get a 10% pay rise every year, then in 2 years you're going to be 48 grand, slightly above 48 grand. Whereas if you're starting a job that's a 50 grand, but it's only like a 5% pay rise, over the course of so many consecutive years, you'll actually be on less money. So pay rises is an important thing because that will, as I say, that can have cascading impact on your salary in the long run. It's a long-term investment. Another thing to look at is stuff like flexible working hours. So in a panel we had earlier, Tasmin was saying, she's got medical issues where she needs time off work intermittently, and she also needs to be able to work remotely. Now, remote working and flexible working hours, the mainframe industry is very, very good for. It's very inclusive about, but not a lot of places are. A lot of companies nowadays want people to come into the office more and more regularly, at least 2 days a week, 3 days a week in some cases. And that's not going to be viable for people with disabilities or medical issues or mobility issues. So it's important to kind of recognize where your priorities are. Maybe you take slightly less money, but you don't have to commute. So actually, in the long run, you actually save more money. You're not spending on traveling, therefore you keep more money. Your actual take home kind of salary is higher. There's other things too. Extended meal breaks, just having an hour's lunch, that can be nice. You can meet up with your partner and have a nice meal on your lunch break. It's a bit more relaxed. It might even give you time to make important calls, like go to the doctors or make important calls about your insurance or something. So extended meal breaks, extended lunch breaks. Subsidized food, a canteen. A lot of places will have, like I've been to the IBM office and they have really nice food that the staff, at least at the York Road office in London, and they serve incredibly decadent luxury food. And as a guest, it was free. I'm assuming it's at least free or subsidized if you're a member of staff, but that's pretty nice, versus just going to, One Stop or Tesco and getting a meal deal. It's quite nice to have something like that. Investment in training as well. It's all well and good saying, this company is going to pay me a lot of money, but if there's no opportunity to grow and thrive because there's no training, then actually you might not be able to convince the senior managers to give you a pay rise. Well, why would we give you a pay rise? You're the same employee now as you were 5 years ago. You haven't done anything since. And that's not your fault, but that's because maybe there's not the investment in training. So, the last job I had, I worked in aerospace and there was almost no opportunity to train or to diversify or to upskill. You started a job and then, 40 years later, you'd retire and you'd have done the same job for potentially 40 years. There was no growth. There's other stuff too. Working abroad, I've been to Barcelona with work. That was really nice. I've had colleagues who've been to Portugal with work, who've been to, I think one of them went to Madrid recently, to a different part of Spain, America, obviously loads of states in America that you could visit because a lot of them will work with, say, BMC or IBM or 21CS. So there's a lot of opportunities, and you've got events as well that they might let you travel to. So IBM and Broadcom do tech exchange events, or you've got GSC, or you've got Share. So working abroad is another thing. There's other stuff too, like health insurance. That's obviously very, very important if you're in America, where you don't have a free national health service. So to that end, basically, you should consider what is most important to you. How much of a difference in pay is it worth to have a difference in paid time off? Is a £1 grand less salary, £1,000 less in the pocket each year, actually, is that worth having an extra 3, 4, 5, say 10 days off? Well, also it depends, because you won't always see all of that money, the extra salary. You might get taxed on it, whereas you can't get taxed on a day off. So, it's worth considering. And this is an important one as well. Don't be afraid to leave. So actually, let's say the benefits aren't great, or they were great, and your company has started to invest less money into that, so you get less time off, or you haven't got a pay rise in ages, or they don't train you anymore, and you just think, I really care about training, I care about pay rises, and I care about having a nice extended lunch break. So you want to leave, but you might think, could I leave, at my age, in my kind of career? Is it right to do? It's worth noting that the Bureau of Labour Statistics state that the average jobs held in a lifetime is 12.5 jobs for men and 12.1 jobs for women. That's an average. Obviously, you don't have a 0.1 of a job. But the point is that it's roughly 12, just over 12 jobs for men and women. So if job number 1 or number 2 or number 3 isn't enjoyable, don't be afraid to leave and just skip to job number 2, because ultimately you're still going to be way below average. Over the course of your life, a lot of people, some people are going to have 24 jobs and some people are going to have 1, and that average is going to make 12. You could start a job at, IBM or Dell or wherever, and 40 years later retire and have never left that company. Or you could have started a job and within a year you've changed twice. But as long as you find a job that makes you happy and you're satisfied with, that is the most important thing. So don't be afraid to leave. And my last bit of advice, nobody can be good at everything. So not every job is right for you. And that is okay. So what
Niall, I've lost your audio, if you can hear me. Niall, can you hear me? Niall? Can't hear you.
Hello, am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. You're back.
I have no idea what happened. Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay.
How long has it been gone
Can you go
for?
back to the previous slide and I think we lost you
Yeah,
after the previous one.
that's okay. I can do that. Yeah. I'm sorry about that, everyone. I have no idea why that's happened. Did I do this one or did I not go?
Just after this one, I think.
Okay. So this one was basically, don't be afraid to leave your business. The average number of jobs held in a lifetime is 12.5 for men and 12.1 for women. So yeah, if you don't enjoy your job, don't be afraid to leave. Don't know whether that one worked okay, but this one was, not every job is right for you. Not everyone can be good at everything. So if for example, let's say I want to be good at juggling and I want to be good at woodwork and I want to be good at painting and I want to be good at IT and interpersonal skills and etc. That's just not reasonable. There's not enough time in a day to learn all that, and not enough time in the day to become a masterful at that. So that's okay. You can't be good at everything. And what I was saying, obviously on mute, sorry about that, everyone, was that the circle block does not, again, this might seem condescending, but the circle block does not need to change so that it can fit into the star hole. The circle block should be happy to work to its strengths. So it fits in the circle hole, it does its job well. But maybe it just so happens to fit in a square hole too. And isn't that just a lucky coincidence? But it's not an expectation. We don't expect HR to be good at software development, and we don't expect software development to be good at HR. But equally, if they can do both, if you can be good interpersonal software developer, maybe you make a good team leader of a software team. We can find those kind of opportunities to kind of make the most of both. But yeah, some people will just fill one niche, or maybe they fill a variety of roles, but not everyone can. So we just need to acknowledge that some people have a strength, and we let them focus on that strength. So enough about the employees. This is important because what about the employers, right? It's all well and good us applying for jobs, but it's not a one-way system. We apply because there is an offer, there's an opportunity. So how is that working? For example, these next slides, we're going to cover things where if you aren't, as an employer, or as your company, need to be conscious of these things. If not, you risk losing talent. You risk attrition. Okay, so Social Talent polled over 500 talent and HR leaders to discover how they thought about employee engagement and retention. Over half, so that's 53%, say their career growth opportunity is the key motivation for engagement. So if you don't feel like you are progressing and growing and thriving, that is statistically the main motivator that people have. And yet 41% of respondents did not feel engaged at work. Also, 54 found that internal mobility was not a priority for the organizations. So imagine as an individual, I care about my career growth, my opportunities. So I think, okay, I'm at company X and I want to progress in company X, but that company has no internal mobility. I can't progress. Like I said, in the aerospace industry, they do not invest in training. They do not invest in upskilling. There is no internal mobility. So in that case, employees are not engaged. As it says there, 41% do not feel engaged, and they're not. There's no opportunity to progress or grow because, again, 54% of organizations don't prioritize internal mobility. In that case, attrition goes up. People leave, and that's not because people are lazy or because people are selfish or anything negative. It's actually because they have no other option. What's the expectation, that they should appeal to HR, or should the company just do better by its employees? So that's the reality. Some numbers here. So 64% of candidates find that after a job opening, they'll actually research the company. So that 64% of people will see an opportunity and do research before applying. 37% said they will actually move on to another job opening if they cannot find relevant information on the company. So if that company seems sketchy, shady, they will just not even apply. Additionally, 61% of employees say that the realities of the job that they work differ from the expectations set during the interview process, and that has left them disillusioned and likely to leave. So imagine applying for a job and being told you're going to get two volunteering days a year and 25 vacation days. And then you apply, you get through, you get the job, you start work, and then you're told you've got 20 days of holiday and you're not allowed to volunteer. That is, there's a problem there, because what you were told versus what you received are different. They do not match. And that is going to immediately ring alarm bells for people. They will want to leave because they feel like if they can't trust in the company to be faithful in that regard, where can they trust in the company? So transparency is key. If a company lies to its employees, those employees will not have any loyalty to that company. So that's something that companies and employers need to be conscious of. Growth. So we talked earlier about internal mobility and training and development. 87% of millennials rate professional career growth and development opportunities as highly important to them. And that was a Gallup 2016 survey, a kind of questionnaire. 87% think that professional career growth and development opportunities are highly important. So if you're not giving someone the opportunity to grow or to develop, what are you giving them? You know, what's the point of them staying? That is one of their highest priorities, one of the high priorities. You need to kind of incentivize people to stay. Remote working, staggering 98% of workers express their desire to work remotely. And we touched on earlier, again, that might not even be just for convenience. It might be to save money. It might be for disability and mobility issues, right? So people who, for example, can't drive or they can't easily get on the train because they're in a wheelchair, for example. So working remotely is massively important. In 2024, it is very much reasonable to be, to expect that you should be allowed to work remotely, at least part of the time, if not all. So this overwhelming figure, 98%, reflects people's growing affinity towards the kind of flexibility, autonomy, and the better work-life balance that remote work offers. Again, if you as a company are not offering remote working at least some days of the week, you are not going to have as many applicants because people will immediately be turned away. And that was a very recent poll. That was a Buffer 2023 sort of survey. 79%. That's the this is regarding talent. So the number one reason why employees quit is a lack of appreciation in their current job. So 79% of people who quit have claimed it was a major reason for leaving. They felt underappreciated. Now, how long does it take to just say to someone, "You've done a great job. I'm really proud of you. Well done. I can't wait to see what you bring, for the rest of the year, next month. I can't wait to see what you achieve." That is all it takes to motivate someone. And 79% of people who quit said it was just because they felt underappreciated. It takes seconds to give someone, a proper, pat on the back or a shout out in your next all hands meeting. If you don't do it and you lose staff and you have to then reinvest in training, you're going to regret it. So for employers, absolutely appreciate your talent. Okay. 50% of candidates would not take a job from a company with a bad reputation, even for a pay increase. I know that's true because me and my dad in our local area, we know loads of places that are hiring and they hire pretty good salaries. They have awful reputations and we would never ever apply there. Okay. The Better Team blog undertook this research and found that roughly half, between 49 and 51%, depending on, whether you want to get to the decimal place, they basically found that those people wouldn't work for a company with a bad reputation. And that's also maybe even an ethical reason. You wouldn't apply to certain, potentially if you're a pacifist, you wouldn't apply to a military organization, etc. There's been loads of protests in the UK regarding companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. So, it's important to recognize these things. The way you're perceived can mean that people won't apply. So I think all said and done, what I wanted to kind of get through in this session is as an applicant, there are things that you need to keep in mind, and there are things that you need to prioritize. And as an employer, or a sort of hiring staff, you need to just make sure you do the best you can do. Otherwise, you are going to face attrition, and people won't apply. It's not even that people leave; they just don't want to join. So those are things that I would suggest people are very conscious of. That is actually the end of my presentation. However, I'm absolutely welcome to any and all questions. Thank you. I've just seen in the chat. Thank you all for saying I could not hear the audio. I have no idea when that happened, but or how. But I don't know. We've had a lot of technical difficulties today. I've just seen as well, Matt Lucas, could you comment a little on the impact of Gen AI, so generative AI? I'd observed there were an arms race with candidates using AI to craft the perfect CV. Yeah, it's actually interesting, Matt. I have helped a few students recently with their CVs, and I actually think that schools are teaching the wrong way of writing a CV. I saw someone who wrote one that was, it almost had like a border on the left that took up about a third, maybe a quarter or a third of the entire page. And it basically just had a photo of her face, and it had a few other details, like personal details, and the rest of it was empty. And on the right, there was like a bullet point of loads of stuff, but it didn't really elaborate on anything. And it was 1 page long. And I said to her, you could remove that and elaborate and make a 2-page CV. I think most recruiters, they use the F method, where they look at the top line, maybe the next line, and they kind of filter down the bullet points. And they literally just do like a top line, maybe second paragraph, and then just filter through. Is there any key buzzwords? if they don't, see anything they don't want, they weren't going to read the rest of it anyway. So you might as well do, a second page. It's either, you could say it's wasted effort, but maybe they do want to read it. It's all there. And maybe they use Control F and they just search for a buzzword. If you've elaborated a bit more, maybe you've used the right word. AI is an interesting one because, like I say, I don't think schools are teaching the right way, especially considering, to anonymize things now, people have to have their kind of their sex, gender, age, all that removed. So it's just objective information. This is what they've said they're good at, not who they are, when they were born, not whether they're male, female, black, white, anything. Gen AI, I think, is an interesting one. I think sometimes it's the way things are written that give it away. You lose a bit of the human touch. I actually told someone once, possibly make a spelling mistake on purpose because it will make them believe that your CV is real. Maybe don't make a bad one, but maybe don't put a full stop somewhere, or maybe I don't know, do something like. So like, for example, you might do space hyphen space rather than colon. Again, something that shows I'm a human. I've written this in a human, slightly flawed way, but it's personalized. But I think, the problem is, like you say, there's an arms race for making the perfect CV. There's no such thing as a perfect CV because most recruitment people, they literally, as I say, they'll look at the top line, they'll look at the sort of second paragraph, they'll see the words, I'm a consistent, punctual member of staff, and they'll go, yeah, we know all that. Then you'll see the next line, and it might say, I've worked in this industry for 30 years, and I know all about, say, software engineering. Yeah. And then you look through the bullet points, and you go, where have they worked? How long were they there for? The first couple words. Okay, yeah, sure. We'll put them in the white list, the maybes, rather than the no's. So I've also heard slightly more nefarious stories of people pasting the job description in white text on the background, CVs to fool AI by filtering. I mean, that's actually also true. Yeah, AI is also being used for filtering. I don't think that's. I think if I'm honest, this might be quite harsh. I think that's quite lazy from a lot of companies. If you're relying on something to hire, you're going to find that there is no kind of humanity unless you program the humanity into it. You're not going to be able to think, for example, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but Matt's point about AI based filtering. Let's say someone says, we want someone who is a really hardworking and a really driven individual. They might say, how much volunteering do they do? Okay, and I do a lot of volunteering, but that's something that a recruitment person might think, actually, is this relevant? Or are we talking about how much they do extra in the job? Maybe they volunteer in an employee resource group rather than volunteering at a charity shop. AI-based filtering might not recognize that unless it's specifically programmed to recognize, volunteering at an ERG versus volunteering, full stop. But yeah, you're right. If you just hide something, you put it in size like 1 font, and you just copy and paste in white the job description, then it's going to look for someone who ticks all the right boxes and someone who's got who hits these criteria. And of course you have, because you've just copied and pasted that criteria in. I say that I think that's poor, though. For me, I think companies have an obligation to let people know whether they got the job or to let people know whether they didn't get the job. And I think they really ought to check people's CVs, because if you're going to spend all the time writing one, someone else should have the due diligence to actually read it. But I mean, maybe that's controversial in 2024. After, do you have any questions? Yeah, go for it.
So do you have any tips on how to stand out in terms of the CV resume that you submit, and also in the actual interviews as well? What would you do? Any recommendations in terms of the interviewer would remember you out of 10, 15 people they've interviewed? Why remember Niall?
Yeah, this was something that I got asked recently at Bedford College. So for me personally, one of the things I do to sort of make my CV stand out a little bit, I will write it in like Microsoft Word or whatever word processor, and I will then export it as a PDF. But what I do and what that allows for is I can actually put hyperlinks in. So for example, if I refer to the fact that I volunteered at an event and there's actually a photo of me volunteering, maybe I don't have it as a blue, a bright blue underline, but I actually put the link in for when it says like, Birmingham Pride, or say I volunteered at BMC's what is it, International Day of Service, there's actually a link then. So if someone was to, for whatever reason, to click on it, or maybe I do it in a dark blue color, so it doesn't stand out too much, but they think, oh, that's weird, I'll click on that. It actually shows them Niall's done this. It's not just that he said he's done it, he's proven he has done it. And equally, people like to put in links to their LinkedIn on their CV nowadays. They like to put in links to their GitHub. These portfolio kind of things can help you stand out because, again, you're evidencing not just I'm saying I've done this, but I can really prove it. When it comes to an interview, I think it's important to make sure that you. I think a lot of people are told you've got to be confident. You don't always have to be confident, but you just have to sort of believe in yourself. You don't have to say I'm the absolute, I am the belle of the ball, I'm the best person for the job, there's nobody better than me, because then you'll seem arrogant, you won't seem like a team player, people will be potentially deterred from hiring you. If you were to say something like, look, like I said earlier, I've made this mistake and I learned from it, you're showing that you have grown as an individual. And when a company wants to hire someone who they want in for the long haul, they want to know that person will grow and will thrive versus someone who, is literally just in it for the salary and then just go home. They do the 9 to 5, they clock off and they never do a single extra second of work. If they do decide to go for someone who is just the kind of I will do the bare minimum, then is that really somewhere you wanted to work in the first place? Did you want to work somewhere where you didn't feel like you had any opportunity to really stand out and make yourself, be proud of yourself? But yeah, I think it's important in interviews. You want to be able to say, like, I have done this, I've made this mistake. And I think it's important as well to stand out, ask questions. You have an opportunity there to say, right, this is what I care about. For me, one of the questions I asked in every interview was, what is your policy on volunteering days? That showed me that the company either did or didn't care about, they might say we care about equity and we care about inclusion and diversity. Do they put their money where their mouth is? Do they give me time off to support these schemes, to support these charities? And for example, some people say, again, their first question at the end of the interview, someone says, what questions have you got? Do you have any questions? It's, yeah, what's the policy on working from home? I have this potential disability, or I have chronic fatigue, I need to be able to do this. And if they say we don't do that, then you immediately know I'm not going to waste time with the second interview. I know for a fact this business is not for me. And sometimes, as I say, Atul has asked a question about what can you do to stand out. Sometimes you want to stand out in a good way, and sometimes if that company is not for you, you've then made the point to them you don't care about employees and their health because you are having a policy that is outdated in 2024, and so you've stood out in a way that maybe makes it better for the next generation of applicants. Maybe, let's say, I'm just going to say, I don't know, let's say it's I don't know, Rocket Software. I'm making this up. Obviously, Rocket Software, I don't know for a fact I like this at all, but let's say Rocket Software have a job opening and I say I want to apply, but I have the interview and I say, do you do you allow for flexi time? Like, what if I have kids and I need to look after them? And Rocket go, no, we don't allow for flexi time whatsoever, not just on a case by case basis, but never. Then I would say, I think you're missing a trick here. You're not going to have a lot of people who want to stay, and I'm going to rescind my application. And then you've then made it clear to them that they need to prioritize that. Maybe then in a year's time, they have more job openings. They start to allow that because they know that someone really stood up for themselves there. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. So I have friends who've actually rejected the companies when they've been for interviews because there's certain kind of criteria they haven't met. So they will actually send a letter to them saying, I reject, don't take me any further in your process as I've decided not to carry on or look for a job with you in the current place. So that's a good point. I've got one more question in terms of
go for it. Yeah.
There are some people, especially when they're young, a little bit afraid to talk about salaries and money and things like that because it might seem like I'm only after the money kind of thing. What's your advice on that?
I'm very much a kind of I've always been like, I'd say worked in an aerospace industry. I've very much always been pro union, pro kind of the people versus pro the corporation. I think it's important that you discuss maybe not to the specific figure, but you discuss stuff like salaries or pay rises. I've had people say to me before, what was your pay rise this year? And I've said it's this. And people have said, oh, that seems really unfair. I only got this. And actually, I then had to explain to them, I understand why you'd feel, a bit down about that you got less of a pay rise. But first things first, we're in different teams. So the budget's going to be allocated differently. I have no control over that. But also, I've always tried to volunteer for every opportunity that comes my way. If you haven't done that, how can you say with confidence that you should have the same increase as me? And that's not to be competitive. That's to be a motivator for them, to saying to them, why don't you just apply for more things? Why don't you talk at GSE? Why don't you ask if you can speak at IBM Tech Exchange? Because if you do that and you stand out, maybe you will get that percentage, the same percentage that I did. Maybe you go from a 2% pay rise to a 4 or 5. I think it's important to be able to discuss that, because as well, it helps people know whether they're being undervalued. So maybe someone, let's say, I've worked in a job for 10 years and I know someone else who's joined a year ago and they are getting paid more than me. I might say, well, why? And then someone else can say, it's actually because they've got all these skills and, we desperately needed someone with this existing knowledge. We couldn't afford to train them, so we're paying them more, but we're not investing in training. Oh, okay, fair enough. That justifies it. I just think it's important that there's a healthy communication. It doesn't have to be, like I say, it doesn't have to be competitive. You just have to know why things are the way they are. If you're being shortchanged, it's important that you know that. But if you're not being shortchanged and someone is paying you a reasonable amount, don't be bitter. Just ask the question. If for example, if I could say to my boss at Vitali, I know this person's on this salary or this person's had this pay rise. I would like to earn more money. What did they do that I haven't done? It's an awkward question, but it's important that I can ask that, or that you can ask that in any business, so that you can then grow and thrive. And like I say, that you then don't feel, that there's internal mobility, there's the progression, rather than I want to leave. And then a healthy dialogue will prevent attrition, because you'll know what you need to do.
That's good advice. And as I said, I think the pay rise has to be earned. It shouldn't be just I've been here a year, so I deserve something. Yeah.
Obviously, there's got to be some because of inflation, but yeah, I think you can't just say, well, I've been here a year, I deserve 20% more. Well, wait a minute, what have you actually contributed to justify that? For me, one of the things I do that I'm really proud of at BMC is at Vitali, is I help to get Vitali's name out there. I do a lot of work in the kind of supporting the social media kind of marketing team. I repost everything. I make my own posts, I apply for podcasts, and then as a new company, I'm helping that company boost their kind of status. Yes, it's not part of my job description, but it shows that I've gone above and beyond. And again, then if someone says to me, well, why have you got this much more than I have? I can go, well, have you done any of these? Maybe do that and it'll go your way.
Yeah. Good tips. Good. So we've got a couple of minutes left now. Just a final kind of reach out. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions for Niall at the moment? And please feel free to unmute yourself.
I think Matt, if just going back to Matt's question, if you wanted to, I don't know I think you were in it actually, but if you watch Deepak's session from earlier today on generative AI, he might be a good person to ask about the Gen AI kind of AI based filtering. But I think that's a really important point. Actually, I think that's something we all want to be conscious of over the coming years.
Yeah, that was a good question. Matt, do you have a comment?
No, nothing for me. I do, what I would say on the whole generative AI thing, and also to your point, Niall, about LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn has made it so easy to apply for jobs.
Yeah.
When you look on LinkedIn and you said, this job application, this job posting went up 8 hours ago and it's had 250 applicants, it can be quite disconcerting. And I think that, coupled with the ability to create CVs with AI versus the ability to filter, at least do initial filtering of CVs using AI, means that certainly the job market is becoming a lot more automated now.
Yeah.
Certainly over the last 5-10 years.
But I'll say one thing about that. If you are worried that you might lose a job because of something like generative AI and this AI-based filtering, I'll tell you what AI can't replace is going to an event like GSE and actually just meeting someone, shaking their hand, and making a genuine, honest-to-God impression. And I know Elizabeth Popova did that for Mark Wilson, and then years later, Mark hired her, or at least Mark's company, like RSM Tech, was bought by BMC, and BMC then hired her. And she'd made that impression and she'd done that, and I know that that will happen at something like IBM TechX as well. You can meet 21CS and shake Rebecca Levesque's hand, and then if you apply in the future, she might recognize your name and go, oh, actually I remember this person. That has made an impression in a way that AI can't. So that's always another thing to kind of to do. The only problem is obviously attending the event, but if you can make it, that's something that AI can't replace.
Fantastic. That's a good note to end on, actually. So now, thanks so much for putting the content together, taking us through today. Fantastic advice. For everybody, can I just remind you, please, if you can please go to the feedback form and provide any feedback on how Nal can be even better and more impactful in the next session. That would be very useful. So thank you once again, and we'll see you in the next session.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.